All right, let's talk Big Brother 27. 83 days in that house, so many alliances, and it all comes down to one winner. But for Vince, it was pure heartbreak. I mean, he was so close to that grand prize. So what happened? What went wrong right at the very end?
And this quote from Vince really just says it all, doesn't it? You're thinking life-changing money, decent money, or none. That's the whole game right there. He could practically taste it. So how did he end up with decent money instead of the life-changing kind?
Okay, so let's really dig into this. We're going to use Vince's own words, straight from his post-game interviews, to put this puzzle together. We'll look at the strategic mistakes, those pivotal moments, and yeah, that insane pressure that just completely changed the game for him. So first up, his strategy. Or maybe the downfall of his strategy. See, Vince's entire game was built around one thing: self-preservation. But that need to survive, just spiraled into this web of lies. And believe me, it absolutely came back to haunt him.
One of the house guests gave him this nickname, Lion and Crying Vince, and that just kind of hits the nail on the head, right? One minute he's this aggressive player, a lion. The next he's totally overwhelmed and emotional. He even said it himself. He admitted the game was moving so fast that he literally lost track of his own lies. It was like this domino effect that he just couldn't get ahead of.
And really, this right here is the heart of the problem. It wasn't that he was being malicious. He called it self-preservation desperation. That raw fear of going home early made him make promises he knew he couldn't keep. And what does that do? It poisons the well with the jury, the very people who decide your fate. And look, here's where the rubber meets the road. These weren't just little white lies, they had game-ending consequences. Take Keanu. He betrayed a close friend, only to find out later that Keanu's vote was actually in play. Ouch! Then he cuts Lauren, maybe his most trusted ally in the whole house, a move he said he really regretted. Every single one of those broken promises turned a friend into a burned juror. But you know what's crazy? It wasn't just his social game that fell apart. His single biggest mistake, the one that really cost him, it wasn't a lie. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a total, complete meltdown during the most important competition of the entire season.
Yeah, that's the number right there, $750,000. That's how Vince saw that final head of household competition. It wasn't just a comp. It was the $750,000 comp. Everything he'd worked for 83 days was on the line in that one moment. Talk about pressure.
And you could just picture it, this collapse happening in real time. First, he builds up this huge lead. He's crushing it. He knows the answers. But then, the pressure just hits him like a ton of bricks. He starts second-guessing himself, overthinking everything, until, in his own words, the gears in his mind just stopped. He was totally frozen.
Wow. I mean, you can just feel the frustration in that quote, can't you? That moment, that mental block right there, that's when the game slipped through his fingers. And the worst part is, he knew it. He knew it as it was happening.
So this wasn't just about bad strategy, right? It goes deeper. It was an emotional breakdown. And to really get why he cracked under pressure, you have to realize what that house is. It's a psychological pressure cooker. And for someone who calls himself an introvert, it's basically a nightmare scenario.
This is so telling. He goes into the game with an idol, a role model, Cody Calafieri. Mr. Cool, calm, and collected. That's the player he wanted to be. But the reality? It was the polar opposite. Instead of calm, he was emotional. Instead of cool, he was crying. Instead of composed, he was completely spiraling, especially when it mattered most.
He actually called the Big Brother house an alternate reality, and that makes so much sense. It takes this guy who says he's quiet, private, not super emotional, and it just cranks the volume up on everything. He was so far outside his comfort zone, he said he was doing things he didn't even recognize in himself. It's just a wild reminder of how mentally tough this game really is.
All right, so after all that, what are the lessons learned? What's the takeaway for Vince? And let's play the what-if game for a second. What would he have done if he hadn't frozen? If he'd actually won that last competition? Because, let's be real, this is the ultimate Big Brother question. If he wins that final HOH, he has to make the single most important decision in the entire game. Who do you take with you to the final two? And man, he was really torn up about it. On one hand, you have Path 1. Take Morgan. She's his last real ally. Maybe taking her proves to that bitter jury that he is capable of loyalty. On the other hand, path 2, cut her. Make a huge, ruthless move to show them, hey, I played this game for myself. Both paths are a massive gamble.
But it seems like he was leaning towards loyalty. I think, at the end of the day, he knew just how many people he'd burned. He felt like showing that one final act of loyalty to Morgan, plus having his 5 HOH wins to back him up, that was probably his only path to convincing that jury to vote for him.
Now, after everything we just talked about, the stress, the emotional breakdowns, losing the game in the final moments, you'd think he would never want to see the inside of that house again, right? Nope, completely the opposite. He says it was the best experience of his life, and he'd sign up to do it again every single summer.
And he's sure that if he ever got that second chance, that whole panic mindset would be gone. He could play a completely different, more composed game. And that kind of makes you wonder, right? Could his biggest mistakes actually become his biggest strengths in a future season? But I guess the real question is, will he ever get that chance to prove it?